So what if I told you that the real engine of scientific progress isn't order and method, but rebellion? And what if science itself is actually closer to art than it is to philosophy? Well, today we're diving into the fascinating and pretty provocative ideas of the great physicist Freeman Dyson. We'll be looking at his collection of essays, The Scientist is Rebel, which, trust me, challenges almost everything you think you know about how science really gets done. Let's just start with this incredible quote. It was actually said to Albert Einstein by his teacher. It's wild, right? It just goes to show that even the ultimate symbol of scientific genius was once seen as a problem, a disruptive force. Dyson uses this to make a really powerful point. That rebellious spirit isn't some roadblock to science. A lot of the time, it's the spark that gets the whole thing started. All right, so let's get into the heart of it. What does Dyson really mean when he calls a scientist a rebel? Because he's not talking about chaos or just breaking rules for fun. It's something much deeper. Yeah, see, the nuance here is everything. For Dyson, the perfect rebel is someone like Benjamin Franklin. A person who thought things through, calculated the risks, and then rebelled. Not to just tear everything down, but to build something better in its place. It's a rebellion with a purpose, driven by thoughtful reason. Dyson actually saw this kind of rebellion up close with his own chemistry teacher, a guy named Eric James. Picture this. You're in a stuffy chemistry class, and your teacher suddenly puts down the textbook and starts reading modern poetry out loud. That's what James did. He was letting a little fresh air into the room, teaching his students that science isn't some dry, sterile thing. It's fueled by the very same passions and emotions that create art. And this is where Dyson's idea gets really big. He saw science as this universal human drive. It's not just a Western thing. He talks about figures throughout history, from Omar Khayyam in the Islamic world to Indian physicists under colonialism. In every single culture, he says, science is the tool that free thinkers use to push back against the dogma of their specific time and place. Okay, but this power to rebel, to literally change the world, it comes at a cost, a really heavy one. As we dig into this next section, we're going to see that the incredible power of science comes with some profound and, frankly, scary ethical dangers. Wow. The biologist J.B.S. Haldane just captured that terrifying power perfectly, didn't he? Wreckers of outworn empires. Scientists are the ones who come in and dismantle the old ways of thinking. In a very real sense, they are destroyers of worlds. And here's the pivot. What happens when that world-wrecking power gets turned towards creating new technologies? Does that power always end up serving humanity for the better? Well, Dyson draws a really sharp line here. He basically says science works for evil when it creates toys for the rich. The laptops, the cell phones, the hypothetical nanorobots. And it works for good when it provides necessities for the poor, like antibiotics and clean water. His warning is that way too often, science that's driven by the market just ends up making the gap between the haves and the have-nots even wider. And that leads us to a really chilling, very modern threat. See, it's not just about governments building massive bombs anymore. The danger now is something Bill Joy called knowledge-enabled mass destruction. The idea is that knowledge alone, say in genetics or robotics, could give a single person the power to cause unimaginable harm. The rebel scientist takes on a much, much darker potential here. But the threats aren't all external. Dyson also zeroes in on a deep internal danger inside the culture of science itself. And it comes down to a kind of intellectual arrogance, a hubris, that's wrapped up in a philosophy called reductionism. So what is reductionism? At its core, it's the belief that the ultimate goal of science is to boil the entire universe down to one simple, elegant formula. To find that single theory of everything. It sounds kind of noble, right? But Dyson argues it can be a dangerous, blinding trap. Just take a look at this. These are the chaotic, beautiful, unbelievably intricate tracks left by particles zipping through a detector. This is the universe in all its messy, wonderful, confusing glory. This is the reality scientists are actually trying to understand. And reductionism, well, it wants to take all of that beautiful complexity and shrink it down to just a few symbols on a piece of paper. Dyson's whole point is that when you do that, you risk losing the very essence of what you're studying. You lose the richness of reality itself. And here we have the perfect, almost tragic example. Einstein's very own theory of general relativity predicted the existence of black holes,
But later in his life, he got so obsessed with finding one single unified theory that he became openly hostile to the idea. Can you believe it? He thought black holes were just messy distractions from the real work. This reductionist philosophy literally blinded one of the greatest minds in history to one of his own most profound discoveries.
So, if reductionism is a trap, what's the alternative? This is where we get to Dyson's vision for a science that is more creative, more humble, and ultimately a lot more human. Just listen to this. This is how Dyson describes a mathematical proof. He doesn't say it's a logical deduction. He calls it a soaring piece of architecture, as lovely as a cathedral. For him, science isn't just about finding facts. It's about creating these beautiful, elegant structures made of ideas. It's an art form. And that brings us to this crucial point. Scientists aren't just robots following some rigid philosophical method. No, they're artisans. They are craftspeople. They're practicing a craft that takes intuition, creativity, and a real feel for the materials they're working with, just like a master carpenter or a sculptor. He even described his own most famous work with this exact metaphor of being a bridge builder. He saw two separate foundations of ideas from different physicists, and his job, as he saw it, wasn't to reduce them to something smaller. It was to creatively design and build a bridge that connected them. And the result was something totally new, a unified structure that was way more powerful than either side was alone. Now that is the work of a craftsman. So when you put it all together, what's the big takeaway from Dyson's rebellious vision? It's that science isn't some cold, rigid philosophy. It's a deeply human act of creation, and it thrives on freedom from dogma. It's about building bridges, not just boiling the world down to an equation. And maybe most important of all, it requires humility, this deep understanding that nature's imagination is always going to be richer than ours. Which leaves us right here with this final critical question. If science really is a creative act, like art, then we, the creators, have a choice to make. We can choose to create toys for the rich that make inequality worse, or we can create necessities that help the poor. We can build weapons of unimaginable destruction, or we can build bridges to a better future. The choice of what we create is ultimately up to us.